What do you think would be the single biggest policy shift that our country would undergo if this national initiative was currently, aside from Iraq, which you talk about, what kind of domestic, would we look, how different would this country look?
Very different. In fact, the first thing and the most important thing domestically to do, and no other candidate is even talking about this, that is to change our system of taxation. We are rushing headlong to an economic catastrophe. It can happen next year, it can happen 10 years. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's coming. And anybody who understands economics, I had a briefing from David Walker, the Comptroller General of the United States. He is taking the initiative to try and brief every presidential candidate to show how dire the problem is. And it is. It's unbelievable. We are spending more than we earn. And the obligation that's out there with respect to the entitlements, with respect to the military-industrial complex, and all of these areas is just horrific. We're talking about 50 to 70 trillion dollars that we cannot meet. Now, that is serious. If we go broke in this country, we're going to take the rest of the world with us because we're so significant. Now, the only way to correct that problem is not with politics as usual. Politicians do not have the gumption to tell the people, and I'm telling the people right now, our system is designed to keep people in civic adolescence. They need to grow up. And they can grow up by becoming lawmakers and taking responsibility for what they do. The people are more conservative than their leaders. And given the opportunity to vote on this, they would make the necessary corrections to our economy that would permit it to flourish and prosper and live within our means. With a change in the system of taxation from the income tax to a retail sales tax with a prebate, making it more progressive than it already is, the people can turn around and take the economy and change it from a consumption economy to a savings economy. That's the strength of China. That's the strength of Japan. That's the strength of anybody who's succeeding economically in the world, is a savings economy, not a consumption economy. And we are going into bankruptcy with our consumption. I'm talking about government consumption. I'm talking about commercial consumption, spending money, debt. Consumption means debt. So I'm talking about government debt, corporate debt, and personal debt. That's what's driving us to this catastrophe.
Okay, that actually sounds like somewhat of a conservative argument, an argument that maybe Republicans would make. And yet, a lot of your other issue positions on things like gay rights and marijuana and all these other things, they seem more liberal. So where do you kind of put yourself on the political spectrum?
Well, I put myself across the whole spectrum. In other words, you try to make up your mind as to what's logical. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that our war on drugs is a failure. We spend 50 to 70 billion dollars a year, destabilize governments, increase crime in the world and in the United States, when all we'd have to do is legalize marijuana and then legalize the regulation of all other drugs. And the drug problem is a public health issue. It's not a criminal problem. And then devise ways to go ahead and empty out our prisons of people that shouldn't be there. And that could be done with education. People can solve these problems if the American people can get involved. This is, here again, we need a tool. All I'm doing with the National Initiative is putting a tool in the hands of the American people to exercise their creative abilities. And it will be explosive. The people are smarter than their leaders.
Could this backfire on you maybe? Because when you say that the people would do X, Y, and Z if they had the national initiative, those are the policies that you agree with. But what if the people actually are different than you're estimating? What if they did something that was completely different than what you want them to do?
Well, that's fine. They're entitled to do that. The people are entitled to make mistakes. My God, look at their representative government. Look at the mistakes it makes. But there's a difference. When the people make a mistake and suffer the consequences, they'll change it quickly. And they'll have the power to change it. So I'm not saying that the people are perfect. They're human beings. But when you look at the collective decision of people, you see that they do as good a job legislatively as their elected officials. But when it comes to fiscal matters, they're far, far and away, because they know it's their money.
More conservative.
They know it's their money, and they're more conservative. And that's what we need, is the people to get a hand on the growth of government. Every time you turn around, so there's a problem that arises. Well, there's some politician who's got some answer to give you more government, and to tell you he's going to bring home the bacon while he reaches in your back pocket and get the money. No, people say, well, that's a conservative view. It's not a conservative view. It's just a logical view. That you look at problems, and some problems can be handled by the private institutions of society, and some problems cannot. They have to be handled by government. But government is a tool. But when the government is not fair towards its citizens, the people have a gut feeling, an aversion towards the government, and that's not healthy. And they have an aversion to paying taxes when they know the taxes are not collected fairly.
Well, obviously, this is something that you're very passionate about. So thank you for sharing that. It sounds like in a way that some of your views are actually very similar to Congressman Ron Paul, who I had in my dorm room not a few weeks ago. Some people I've seen online, several comments to the effect of, I like Ron Paul and I like Mike Gravel. I want them both to run on some kind of a team hybrid ticket. What do you think about that?
Well, first off, I think it's very flattering. I think Ron Paul is a very independent person, and he's very libertarian. I've got traces of libertarian in me. I've got traces of liberalism, classic liberalism, civil rights area. I've got traces of normal liberalism. I've got traces of some areas of Republican. Labels really destroy people's ability in public office to make proper decisions. I'll tell you why. Because the reason why we have labels in our system is so the electorate can quickly identify who that person is. Sure. Well, so what happens, you get a person gets into politics and he starts out his career and he's a liberal. Well, and you can predict how that person will vote. Well, 30 years later, you can still predict how identically he will vote. The question I always ask is, did not that person learn something in the 30 years that he was in elective office? And that's the shortcoming of the process. So
people actually become their labels is kind of what you're saying.
They have to. They have to, because they want their people to recognize this guy's a liberal, so if you're a liberal, you got to vote for him. Well, if he's a dumb liberal, then you're getting a dumb liberal. If he's a dumb conservative, you're getting a dumb conservative. But that's just a shortcoming of representative government. That's the reason why if you get the people involved to make policy decisions, they don't have labels.